At my birthday dinner, my boyfriend raised a toast and said, "Here's to the girl who tries so hard to be pretty." Everyone laughed. I just smiled. The next morning, he woke up to an empty closet, a missing engagement ring, and a text that read, "Now you can laugh alone." 2 months later, he showed up at my door crying. I've always been the kind of woman who wants everything to feel right, not perfect, exactly, but right. I like when things look beautiful, when people are comfortable, when the air around me feels calm and balanced. Maybe it's because I grew up believing that if you just tried hard enough, if you smiled enough, forgave enough, looked good enough, people would love you the same way you loved them. That's what I believed when I met Ethan. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately pulled the attention toward him. Confident, quick-witted, effortlessly charming. He had this easy way of speaking that made even the most ordinary stories sound interesting, and I remember thinking that his voice could make anything sound like a promise. He noticed me first, or at least that's how it felt. One minute, I was quietly minding my own business at a mutual friend's get-together, and the next, he was standing beside me, asking if I believed in fate. I laughed and said no. He grinned and said, "You will." And for a while, I did. The beginning was a dream, constant texts, little gifts, late-night drives where we'd talk about everything and nothing. He'd tell me I was the calm in his chaos, that he'd never met anyone as patient as me. And I loved that he noticed things like that. I loved feeling like I was his safe place. But somewhere along the line, that warmth started to cool. Not all at once, just slowly, in tiny ways that were easy to excuse. The compliments turned into jokes that carried a little bite. The laughter started to linger a second too long after he said something that made me uncomfortable. It was like being teased in a way that no one else realized was cruel, except me. The first time it really stung, we were at dinner with his friends. I dressed up a little more than usual, excited to meet them for the first time. When I sat down, he looked me up and down and said, "Wow, you really tried tonight." Everyone laughed. I forced myself to laugh too, even though my stomach twisted. Later, when I mentioned it to him, he shrugged and said, "Babe, relax. It was just a joke." And that became the pattern. He'd say something that cut me, I'd pretend it didn't hurt, and then I'd find a reason to tell myself I was overreacting. Because if I ever looked upset, he'd act like I was making a big deal out of nothing. And little by little, I stopped pointing things out. I stopped trying to be understood, and I just focused on being agreeable. Still, I held on. Because when he was kind, he was really kind. And when he smiled at me, really smiled, it felt like he still saw the girl he fell in love with. I wanted that version of him back. When my birthday came around, I thought maybe that was my chance. We'd been together almost 3 years, and even though we'd had rough patches, I believed in us. He'd been dropping hints for weeks, saying things like, "You'll remember this birthday forever," or "Make sure you dress up, I've got plans for you." It made me think he might propose. So I spent the day getting ready like it was the most important night of my life. I had my nails done in the pale blush color he always said looked soft on me. I booked a hair appointment and asked for loose curls. He'd once said he loved running his hands through my hair when it looked effortless. I even skipped lunch so the dress I bought would fit just right. It was a pale champagne gown with thin straps and a neckline that felt elegant but simple, something that made me feel like myself without trying too hard. When I walked into the restaurant, the table was already set with candles and wine glasses. My closest friends were there, smiling, waving me over. Ethan stood up when he saw me, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and whispered, "You look amazing." And for a moment, all my doubts disappeared. Dinner started off beautifully. The food was perfect, the laughter was light, and for once, I felt like everything was how it should be. Ethan kept glancing at me with that familiar smile, the one that made my heart tighten in the best way. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the night he's going to ask me. But even as I laughed and talked, there was this quiet tension sitting somewhere deep in my chest, a small, cautious voice reminding me that good moments with him never lasted long. And before the night ended, that voice would be right. Because the toast he was about to make, the words that would come out of his mouth next, would shatter everything I'd built, everything I believed, and everything I thought I was to him. The waiter had just cleared our plates when Ethan stood up, holding his glass of wine in one hand and that familiar, confident smile on his face. The sound of clinking glasses filled the air as everyone turned to look at him. I felt my heart start to race, and my palms grew slightly damp. This was it, I thought. This was the moment I had been waiting for. He tapped his spoon lightly against the rim of his glass. "I just want to say a few words," he began, glancing around the table. His tone was light, playful, the same one he used when he wanted to charm people. My mother smiled at him warmly. My best friend, Clara, nudged me under the table, whispering, "Here it comes." I smiled back, my pulse fluttering in my throat. Ethan looked at me, eyes soft, as if he was about to say something profound. And then, he opened his mouth. "Here's to the girl," he said, raising his glass, "who tries so hard to be pretty." At first, I didn't quite process the words. It was as if my brain refused to translate them. But then, the laughter started. A small chuckle from his friend Mark. Then another from across the table. And then it spread, like a wave I couldn't stop. Everyone laughed. Everyone except me. I just sat there, frozen, smiling faintly because that's what I was supposed to do. My throat tightened, and my face burned. My fingers pressed against the fabric of my dress so hard my knuckles turned white. I heard Clara's laughter falter, then fade into an awkward silence as she looked at me. But Ethan didn't notice. He was too busy grinning, basking in the attention. He sat down, still chuckling, and leaned toward me. "Relax, babe," he whispered, his breath brushing against my ear. "It's just a joke." I nodded slowly, my smile still plastered in place. I didn't trust myself to speak. I could feel every pair of eyes flicker toward me, waiting to see how I'd react. And I did what I always did. I laughed, quietly, like it was funny. Like it didn't split something open inside me. The conversation moved on, but I barely heard a word. I just kept smiling, kept pretending, while inside I felt something unraveling. When the waiter came around to refill our glasses, he hesitated beside me, his eyes full of pity. I could see it. He'd seen women like me before, the ones who smile through humiliation because they don't want to make a scene. I stared down at my plate, pretending to adjust my napkin. My chest felt tight, my eyes burned, but I refused to let the tears fall. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, I watched him laugh with his friends, retelling the same story that had made them all adore him, his voice filling the room as if he owned it. And I realized, in that moment, that I had never really been part of his story. I had just been part of the background, the girl who looked good beside him, the one who made him seem softer, kinder. By the time dessert arrived, I had gone completely quiet. When someone asked if I was okay, I smiled and said I was just tired. Ethan didn't even look up from his phone. Later, when everyone got up to leave, he slipped an arm around my waist as if nothing had happened. To anyone watching, we probably looked like the perfect couple. But I could feel the emptiness in that touch. Outside, as we walked to the car, the night air was cool and sharp. He opened the door for me with a casual, "You were quiet back there." "I'm fine," I said. He studied me for a second, then smirked. "You know, you really need to learn to take a joke." I said nothing. The drive home was silent except for the sound of the tires against the road and the soft hum of the radio. I kept my eyes on the passing lights, my thoughts spinning too fast to form words. The laughter from the restaurant replayed in my head over and over again, every echo cutting a little deeper. When we got home, he went straight to the couch, scrolling through his phone as if nothing had happened. I excused myself, saying I needed to shower. But instead, I just stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My makeup was still perfect. My hair, still curled. I looked exactly how I had wanted to look that night. Beautiful. Composed. Everything I had worked for. And yet, I had never felt so small. When I walked back into the living room, he looked up and smiled. "You're not mad, are you?" I shook my head. "No." He grinned. "Good." Because I was thinking, he stood and wrapped his arms around me. "You're too sensitive sometimes. But I still love you, okay?" And I nodded, because it was easier than fighting. That night, I lay in bed beside him, listening to his even breathing as he drifted to sleep. My mind, however, refused to rest. I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying everything, every little jab, every disguised insult, every moment I told myself it wasn't that bad. By the time the first light of morning crept through the curtains, I knew something had changed. The part of me that always found a reason to stay had finally gone quiet. And in that silence, I heard something new, the faint, steady whisper of resolve. When he woke up, I wouldn't be there. The sun was just starting to rise when I finally sat up. The light filtered through the curtains in soft streaks, touching the floor, the dresser, and finally the side of the bed where Ethan slept, peaceful, unaware, his arm draped carelessly over the pillow where my head had been hours ago. For a moment, I just watched him. I tried to remember the version of him I fell in love with, the one who used to kiss my forehead when I was too tired to talk, who used to send me pictures of the sunrise because he knew I loved mornings. But as I looked at him, all I could see was the man who had humiliated me in front of everyone I loved, and then laughed as if it meant nothing. I realized that if I stayed, I would keep finding new ways to forgive him. I'd keep pretending I didn't mind, keep telling myself that every cruel joke was just bad timing or bad humor. And one day, I'd wake up and not recognize myself at all. I couldn't let that happen. The apartment was quiet, except for the steady ticking of the clock in the kitchen. I slipped out of bed carefully, trying not to wake him. My heart pounded as I pulled my suitcase out from the closet and set it on the floor. The sound of the zipper sliding open seemed too loud, like the room itself was holding its breath. Piece by piece, I began to pack. Clothes, shoes, the small keepsakes I had brought when I moved in, the framed photo of my parents, the little plant I'd kept on the windowsill, the books that had started to gather dust. I folded each thing carefully, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to feel like I was doing this right, like there was dignity in leaving quietly. On the nightstand beside him, the engagement ring he'd given me, or what he called a promise ring, sat glinting faintly in the morning light. He had given it to me 6 months ago, in one of those rare moments when he felt affectionate, saying, "It's not an engagement ring yet, but it's a promise that we'll get there." For a long time I believed that promise. I wore that ring like it meant something, like it protected me from all the moments that made me question us. But as I picked it up, holding it between my fingers, I realized it wasn't a promise at all. It was a distraction. A way of keeping me waiting for the love I kept earning but never receiving. I placed it gently on his pillow, right where my head had rested the night before. Then I took one last look around the room, the photos on the wall, the jacket he always left on the chair, the half-empty glass of water on his nightstand, and I felt something strange. Not sadness, not anger, but relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to make anything perfect. I was just choosing myself. Before I left, I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, watching him stir slightly, mumbling something in his sleep. I thought about waking him, about saying goodbye properly. But there was nothing left to say. I picked up my phone, opened our message thread, and typed, "Now you can laugh alone." I hit send. The sound of the message sending was soft, almost delicate. It felt final. When I stepped outside, the air was cool and still. The city hadn't fully woken up yet, just a few cars on the street, the faint hum of life beginning. I dragged my suitcase down the stairs, each step echoing in the quiet hallway. My chest felt tight, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from release. I didn't have a plan, not really. I just drove. I didn't even know where I was going until I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a small motel on the edge of town. I checked in under my own name, something about that felt important. Inside the small, dimly lit room, I sat on the edge of the bed and took a long breath. For the first time in a long time, no one was watching me. No one was expecting me to smile, or laugh, or make excuses for being hurt. The silence was loud, but it was peaceful. As I sat there, my phone buzzed once, a text from Ethan. "Just my name, Anna?" I turned it face down. Then I powered it off. That night, I slept for 12 hours straight. No dreams. No replaying of laughter. Just silence. When I woke up, I opened the curtains and watched the morning sun spill across the bedspread. It looked exactly like freedom. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was trying. I just was. 2 months. That's how long it had been since I left Ethan, 61 days, to be exact. In that time, I had learned to enjoy silence again. The kind of silence that didn't feel heavy or tense, but peaceful, like standing still after a long storm. I rented a small apartment on the east side of town, nothing fancy, just a quiet space with white walls and sunlight that poured through the window every morning. I bought secondhand furniture, potted a few plants, and hung my own photos on the wall, pictures I'd taken years ago but never printed because Ethan once said photography was just a phase. I started working remotely again, writing small articles and freelance pieces. I joined a painting class at the community center, even though I hadn't held a brush in years. It felt strange at first, sitting in a room full of strangers, dipping my brush into color and not worrying if it looked good. But it was freeing in a way I hadn't expected. I wasn't painting for approval. I was just painting. Every now and then, I'd catch myself thinking about him, not with longing, but with a quiet sort of disbelief. I'd wonder how I ever let someone convince me that love was something you had to earn by shrinking yourself. It was like remembering a dream that used to make sense until you woke up. He didn't take my disappearance quietly. For the first few weeks, my phone filled with messages. Some angry, some desperate, some pretending to be casual. "You're overreacting. You could have at least said goodbye. I don't deserve this. Please, just talk to me." At first, I ignored them. Then, I blocked his number. Mutual friends tried to reach out too. One of them told me Ethan was going through it. He wasn't sleeping much, wasn't eating, had stopped showing up to work on time. Another said he'd been showing up at bars, talking about me, saying he didn't mean it like that. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I had finally understood that closure wasn't something he could give me. I already had it. I'd found it the morning I left, in that quiet apartment, with my suitcase by the door, when I chose peace over being understood. Still, there were nights when I missed the comfort of being known. The smell of coffee in the morning. The sound of another person moving around the apartment. It wasn't love I missed, it was routine. And I had to remind myself that familiarity isn't the same thing as safety. One afternoon, I was sitting on my balcony, sipping tea and reading when Clara called. She had been one of the few people who hadn't left that night, and she'd been checking in ever since. "Guess who I ran into," she said. I didn't have to ask. I already knew. Apparently, Ethan had seen her at a cafe and asked if I was okay. He told her he'd been trying to reach me for weeks, that he just wanted to apologize. She said he looked tired, older somehow, worn down in a way that didn't suit him. "I think he really regrets it," she added softly. I didn't know what to say to that. Regret is easy when the damage is done. It costs nothing to feel sorry when you've already lost what you took for granted. I thanked her for telling me and changed the subject. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help thinking about him. About the look on his face when I used to forgive him, about the way he'd always find a way to make his apologies sound like compliments. I told myself that even if he meant it this time, it didn't change anything. Some things can't be undone with an "I'm sorry." 2 weeks later, it happened. It was a rainy Saturday morning. The kind of day that makes the world feel smaller and quieter. I had just come back from the grocery store, juggling my bags while trying not to get soaked. When I turned the corner to my apartment door, I froze. Ethan was standing there. He looked nothing like the man I remembered, his hair a little longer, his clothes rumpled, his eyes hollow in a way that made him look like he hadn't slept in days. He was holding a small bouquet of flowers, rain dripping down from his hair onto the petals. When he saw me, he didn't speak right away. He just stared, as if he wasn't sure I was real. "Anna," he finally whispered. "Please, don't close the door." I didn't. Not yet. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The sound of the rain filled the space between us. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Every instinct told me to turn around, to protect the peace I had built, but a small, stubborn part of me wanted to know what he had to say. He took a shaky breath. "I just need 5 minutes," he said. "Please." And against my better judgment, I stepped aside. As he walked past me into the apartment, dripping rainwater onto the floor, I realized that this wasn't about reconciliation. It was about closure, and this time it would be mine. Ethan stepped into my apartment like he was afraid to breathe too loudly. His shoes left faint, wet prints on the floor. He looked around the small space, the plants on the windowsill, the stack of books on the coffee table, the unfinished painting leaning against the wall. "This place, it's different," he said quietly. "It's mine," I answered. He nodded, his eyes darting around like he didn't know where to start, like he was looking for a version of me that no longer existed. I could see him trying to piece together what he had lost, but all he found were the traces of someone who had learned to exist without him. "Can I sit?" he asked. I gestured toward the couch. He sat down slowly, clutching the flowers in his hands, the stems bent and dripping from the rain. I stayed standing, arms crossed, watching him. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rain against the window. Finally, he exhaled. "I've replayed that night 1,000 times, he said. His voice was low, rough. "The look on your face when I said it. I thought I was being funny. Everyone laughed, and I told myself it was harmless. But when I saw you sitting there, quiet, smiling like you always did, I knew I'd done something I couldn't take back." I didn't answer. I just let him talk. "I kept waiting for you to yell, to tell me off, to make me feel as small as I made you feel. But you didn't. You just left." His voice broke slightly. "Do you know how that felt? Waking up and realizing you were gone? The closet empty, the ring on my pillow, that text, 'Now you can laugh alone.'" He swallowed hard. "I still see it when I close my eyes." I felt a sharp ache in my chest, but it wasn't pity. It was recognition, the same emptiness I had carried for years, finally reflected in someone else. He leaned forward, his hands trembling slightly. "I was stupid. I thought teasing you made me look funny, confident. But really, I was just insecure. You were everything I wasn't, kind, steady, patient. And instead of appreciating that, I made you feel small." He looked up at me then, his eyes red. "I'm sorry, Anna. I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I mean it. I miss you. I miss us." There was a long pause before he added, almost in a whisper, "I brought this." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was the same ring I had left on his pillow. He held it out to me with shaking hands. I want to do it right this time. Marry me. Let me make it up to you. For a moment, everything went still. The sound of the rain faded, the ticking of the clock seemed to stop. All I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat. I stared at the ring, the same symbol that had once felt like hope and now looked like a weight. He was crying now, real, silent tears running down his face. Please, Anna. I know I don't deserve you, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to. I took a slow step forward and knelt so we were eye level. His face lit up for a fraction of a second, like he thought I might say yes. Ethan, I said softly, do you remember what you told me that night? The toast? He looked down, ashamed. Yes. Here's to the girl who tries so hard to be pretty. He winced, his jaw tightening. I nodded. You were right about one thing. I did try. I tried to be pretty, patient, kind, forgiving. I tried to be easy to love even when it hurt. But what you didn't see is that I wasn't trying for you. I was trying to believe I was worth something. His eyes searched mine, desperate. You are. You always were. I smiled, not bitterly, just softly, the way you smile when you finally let something go. I know. I just wish I hadn't needed your cruelty to realize it. I stood up slowly, my voice calm, steady. You don't need to prove anything to me. I believe you're sorry. But that doesn't mean I have to go back. He looked at the floor, his voice breaking. So that's it? I nodded. That's it. He stood too, running a hand through his hair, breathing hard. I thought if I lost you, I'd lose everything. You didn't lose everything, I said quietly. You just lost the person who kept forgiving you. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Then he nodded, slowly, as if finally understanding something he'd spent his whole life avoiding. He set the ring box on the coffee table and placed the flowers beside it. You deserve better than me, he said. I know, I replied gently. When he walked to the door, he stopped and looked back once, his eyes full of tears. I hope you're happy, Anna. I smiled faintly. I already am. The door clicked shut behind him, and for a long moment, I just stood there. The rain outside softened to a drizzle, and the air felt cleaner somehow. I walked over to the window, watching the streetlights shimmer on the wet pavement. The ring sat on the table, glinting dully in the gray light. I picked it up, felt its weight in my palm for a second, and then set it down for good. That night, I made myself tea, turned on some soft music, and sat by the window, listening to the quiet. It wasn't the kind of quiet that used to make me feel alone, it was the kind that felt like peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for an apology, or a promise, or a reason to stay. I was simply here. Whole. And as I watched the rain fade into mist, I realized something simple but true. Sometimes, the loudest form of revenge is silence. And the greatest victory is walking away, and meaning it.